What is up, guys? Well, for those of you that have been following my social media lately, or those of you that were a part of my live stream last week, I announced that I am now a full-time YouTuber. I go into all the reasons why, so go check out that stream. I'm not going to get into that now. But one of the things that I definitely wanted to make a valiant effort of doing now that I have a lot more time to make a lot more content is deliver a lot more on what my actual intro, what my moniker and everything tells you at the beginning of every single one of these videos. It says Cody Leach, and it says movies, music, and games. And now, while I do the occasional video game review, music is certainly the element of my little trifecta here, one of my three main passions in life that I've been severely ignoring on this channel. I've done a few here and there, but I want to do more. So this is a very unique and hopefully very fun video that I thought would be a lot of fun to do. Not only to see everybody's reactions to the things I'm going to be talking about, but just to talk about personal stories, as well as finally do a collab with a good friend of mine, Stay Metal Ray. He has also got his own YouTube channel that is just skyrocketing. I mean, this guy I went a while without even checking his channel, and then all of a sudden he was like 2/3 of the way to matching my subscriber count. It seemed like overnight. So Stay Metal Ray is a guy that does guitar tutorials, he does covers, he does a lot of guitar and amp and effects pedal reviews. So if you are a music fanatic, if you are a guitar fanatic, absolutely subscribe to his channel. But being that he is so passionate about music, and I'm so passionate about music, I wanted to do this video with him. He also wrote and recorded my intro and my outro for all of these videos, the one that I started using about 4 or 5 months ago. So the guy's got some serious talent. I'm sure we're gonna have very different lists here, but this is an idea that I had to talk about 10 albums that changed my life. Not necessarily my top 10 favorite albums, although some albums on this list would make that list. 10 albums that either impacted me or changed the trajectory of my music taste or hit me at the right moment to where it just impacted my life in a certain way. So, with that being said, be sure to go over, subscribe to Stay Metal Ray, check out his video, tell him that Cody sent you. If you're from Stay Metal Ray's channel, welcome. Welcome to the madness. Appreciate you watching. And let me know your thoughts down below on my top 10 and how it differs from Ray's. Starting off with number 1. Oh boy, this is going to be rough. NSYNC, No Strings Attached. Now hear me out. Don't you hit that subscribe button. Don't you hit that unsubscribe button. You listen, you wait. No Strings Attached came out right in the thick of the 90s pop boy band and girl band phenomenon that was going on. And yes, I was balls deep in that phenomenon. I loved NSYNC, I loved Backstreet Boys and LFO and all of those people. Britney Spears, Christina, I was all about that shit. Okay, that was just my generation. Just forgive me. NSYNC No Strings Attached comes out, and of course everybody loved Bye Bye Bye, Bye Bye Bye, all that shit. So the second or third single of this album comes out, and it's Gonna Be Me, which is still one of their biggest hits, I believe. And what was once my absolute favorite genre of music, which was pop rock, within about a month, I got so fucking tired of hearing the song It's Gonna Be Me every single time I turned on the TV, every single time I turned on the radio, anytime I walked into Taco Bell, I walked into Target, anywhere I went, that song followed me. I swear to God. Shut it off! It was either halfway through playing or just starting or just ending. It plagued my existence for like a full month.
I haven't heard this in years! Yeah, I haven't heard it in like 48 minutes!
To the point that it absolutely destroyed my love and destroyed my interest for pop rock music completely. One song destroyed an entire era of music for me. And my number 2 is very closely tied to that story because it is the album that absolutely changed the trajectory of my music taste and set me on the path of righteousness to where I have been led today. And that is Alice Cooper Classics. This was a greatest hits album. My dad had maybe about 5 Alice Cooper albums at the time, and I don't remember how often he would throw this on. It wasn't like we were big Alice Cooper's fan, but for some reason one day we threw on Classics. I don't know if we were driving somewhere or he was just playing it in the house, which he did often. And you get to the 4th song on that album, which was Love's a Loaded Gun. to this day still one of my absolute favorite Alice Cooper songs. And I became obsessed with this song, to where you had one song that I heard so much that it just made me physically ill, and now I had this new song that I listened to so much that it probably made my father physically ill. And that one song and that one album and all the other awesome songs that were on there, like Hey Stupid and School's Out, Feed My Frankenstein, all of that, made me an absolute Alice Cooper fanatic, to the point where that was actually my first rock concert. In 2000, whenever he came out with the Brutal Planet album, which I still think is his best album and heaviest album, that was my first concert. That was my first rock concert, seeing him decapitate people and, you know, having him be resurrected and have the guillotine and all that crazy shit, which I still recommend. If you can see Alice Cooper, it is one hell of a stage show. And I became a fanatic. I started getting other albums of his, like Hey Stupid and of course Brutal Planet, and then Dragon Town came out not too long after that. Then he kind of went back to the shock rock, and I kind of fell out of love with him for a little bit. I like that heavier era of Alice Cooper, but this one album is responsible for me being the metalhead that I am today. And I'm not sure what album it would have been, or if there actually would have been an album that could have changed my music trajectory in such a drastic way than Alice Cooper classics. Now my number 3 is still within the same year. This is still in 2000. Judas Priest at the time was with Tim Ripper Owens. Rob Halford had left the band, creative differences, whatever the fuck they want to call it, and Tim Ripper Owens came in and fronted the band for 2 albums and 2 live albums. And their second album was just released, titled Demolition. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I was driving with my dad to something that we had in Ohio called the Rib Off, which was like this big festival where a bunch of different restaurants would create their own rib recipe, their own sauce recipe. You would go there, you know, there'd be beer and live music and ribs, and you would vote at the end on which ribs were the best, and then they would get crowned, you know, King of the Rib Off or something like that. It was like an annual thing. My dad and my dad's best friend loved this thing. And we were driving trying to find a parking spot, and he had Demolition in the CD, and it was just kind of getting to the tail end of some song on that album. And then started the song Devil Digger, which is like track 5, track 6 on Demolition. And the intro to Devil Digger was just like one of the heaviest fucking things that I had ever heard up to that point. Gotta keep in mind, I'm just now kind of getting into rock and metal. I've always heard it, my dad's always played it, never really was listening though. Devil Digger plays, and I did not even want to get out of the car. I didn't even care about the Rib Off at that point. I was like, you guys go, I'm just gonna sit here and listen to this song on repeat for the next 3 hours. I fell in love with this song, with even heavier metal, with Judas Priest. I started listening to all of the old Judas Priest. I started listening to Jugulator, which was the previous album of Tim Ripper Owens. I started like idolizing the live albums, which I still hold true that Judas Priest is one of the few albums, or one of the few bands out there that always sounds better live. Their songs just have so much more power live, and there's no other band that I feel that way with. I almost always prefer the studio version. The Live in London and the Live Meltdown from, I believe it was 98, I was just infatuated with those. If I was playing video games, if I was hanging out in my room, if I was doing homework, those albums were playing in the background. And Judas Priest to this day is still probably in my top 5 bands of all time. At some point there will be a Judas Priest tattoo on this skin. I love this band. I idolize Rob Halford and Tim Ripper Owens. I'm excited as fuck for this KK's Priest album, which will be coming out here in a few days. I have been a fanatic of this band all because of one song on one album, and that is Judas Priest, Demolition. Now my number 4 is gonna fast forward in time a couple of years to when I was in 8th grade. Now, I had already been into rock, I'd been into metal, I've been kind of dabbling here and there, but for the most part I kind of stuck to what I knew. And I remember one of my best friends in junior high, named Michael, started getting into rock and metal himself. And him and his little group of friends that I didn't even know became Metallica fanatics. And he was always talking about Metallica this, Metallica that, Master Puppets, Ride of Lightning, blah, 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 blah. And so one of the few times in my life when I could honestly remember wanting to do something to follow somebody else, because that is something that I just by nature do not do. I am totally my own path, whether or not I'm the only person on that path or not. One of the few times I remember wanting to follow somebody else. I went home after hearing him talk about Metallica so much and not being able to join in the conversation or act like I knew what the hell he was talking about. I felt like a poser. I went home and I pulled out Metallica's Black Album and put it on, and of course I knew Enter Sandman. Everybody knew Enter Sandman. That's like 10 times out of 10 if you're listening to the radio and they're playing Metallica, it's fucking Enter Sandman. Put it on, Enter Sandman kicks right at the beginning, and I listened to the whole album and I'm like, holy shit. This is the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life. Where has this album been? What have I been doing with my life? What the hell? What the hell? Metallica's Black Album. Probably still my favorite Metallica album, although there's 2 or 3 songs in there that I'm just fucking sick of hearing, like Enter Sandman. I became a Metallica fanatic to the point where I was now schooling them. I was back in there and I was listening to all the older albums. Saint Anger had just come out and pissed everybody off, including me, although I convinced myself that I liked it for a few months. And suddenly I was the one knowing all the songs. I was the one knowing all the lyrics. I was the one knowing all the behind the scenes. My dad had the live shit Binge and Purge box set, and I was watching the And Justice for All tour on a VHS tape on a tiny ass TV with the lights off, so when they do the little guitar thing on one, I'm in there like I took the Scary Guy stencil and I started drawing it on all of my notebooks for school. Every single school project that I had like Metallica logos somewhere on that bitch, whether it had nothing to do with it. Paul Revere rides again, Metallica. I became a fanatic of this band. And still to this day, I will love and defend Metallica till the day that I die. I understand some of the criticism towards it. I understand some of the beef that people have with this band. And I'm sure, just like anything, there's people out there that just, no biases whatsoever, genuinely think that they suck. And it's whatever. There's bands out there that I think that suck. Totally fair. But Metallica is something that I have lived and breathed ever since I was in 8th grade. And it's all because of Metallica's Black Album. Now, over time, I go back and forth. Black Album, Ride the Lightning, Master Puppets. I mean, any of those could be my number one on a different day. But Black Album was so influential to me and changed my metal trajectory to the point where now I'm like, holy shit, like Judas Priest is not the only band out there. There's actually bands out there that are just fucking amazing that I'm too stupid to go and research. And it's also another reason why it's so influential for me. It was one of the albums that really made me want to play guitar. And when I finally got a guitar, it was one of the albums that I just painstakingly sucked at trying to recreate all these songs. I mean, like I was 2 days into playing guitar and I'm sitting there trying to figure out, For Whom the Bell Tolls and shit. And I'm just like, son of a bitch. There were so many techniques with guitar playing that I taught myself and I learned and I got better at through the Black Album. I mean, up and down picking, I learned by trying to play Nothing Else Matters. Fast down picking and fast palm muting, from Holier Than Thou. I mean, there were so many songs in this album that I just learned a particular skill from. I would be able to play like the first couple of measures of this song and then it was just, I was fucked, I couldn't do that. So I'd move on to something else, learn another skill, come back, finally be able to do that. As far as my musicianship, as far as a guitar player, this is the most influential album for me on this top 10. Now, less than a year after I gained my infatuation with Metallica, I moved across the country. We moved from Ohio to where I still live to this day, which is near Savannah, Georgia. And I spent the entire summer, and really a lot longer than that summer, but especially that first summer here, really feeling alone. And really feeling just out of my element, fish out of water. What is this place? Who are these people? It's so different. It's weird. I don't like it. I want to go home. Those natural things that people, especially kids, feel whenever you're moved, especially long distances. Completely different culture shock. And one of the albums that I think I was just bored one day, and I was really playing the living shit out of the first Xbox, which had this feature that was so revolutionary for a gamer, where you could put CDs onto the hard drive and play your own music while you're playing a video game. And so I just started taking things from my dad's music collection randomly that summer while I was playing video games, because that was about all I was fucking doing that entire summer. It was way too goddamn hot for somebody from Ohio, and I didn't know anybody. So I'm up in our rental house in my little loft bedroom, and one day I decide to pop in Godsmack's Faceless. I know some of you guys hate Godsmack. I don't give a shit. It's not why we're here. It's not what we're talking about. Go listen to whatever you want to listen to. Godsmack is still one of my favorite bands of all time, one of my most influential bands. This was the first band from like my new generation that I got to obsess over. I was leaving the 80s and the 70s and the 90s behind, finally kind of coming to my own generation, this new wave of rock and metal. And Godsmack's Faceless was just one of those albums that was perfect from start to finish. Every single song in this album was single worthy. Every single song in this album you could listen to. And it, again, like Metallica's Black Album, was a album that was so helpful, so important to me whenever I started playing guitar. Metallica's Black Album was all about standard tuning and learning that, classic metal technique and down picking and speed and all the different tempo changes. And Godsmack's Faceless was really where I learned to do a lot of drop D, drop C, and kind of learning different ways to do bar chords. And even slower songs like Serenity, kind of same thing with Nothing Else Matters. Learn how to down pick and up pick and go back and forth. And this was an album that to this day I still think is their best album, and probably because of what a special tie I have to it for the time period that it hit me. It was just something that I needed. I was so broken as a person that this album kind of started to help me build the pieces back. Now we're jumping a few more years in time. I think I was either a sophomore or possibly a junior in high school at this point. And I had always been a fan of Disturbed, but not a gigantic fan. There was something that was so unique and fresh about them at the time that, I don't know, I was late to the party. Of course I loved, Down with the Sickness. Everybody loved that song. There was a couple others that I liked, but you had The Sickness that was just very raw and different and kind of had this techno metal with a little bit of a rap flavor, and it was just, what is this? This is, back when they had that new metal thing. That was Disturbed. Then they came out with their second album, Believe, and Believe was very much more of a straightforward album as far as rock and metal, and slowed things down a bit and tried to have a little bit more radio friendly. So it was like two different camps. When they finally came out with 10,000 Fists, that was like these two styles marrying into a perfect explosion. And 10,000 Fists not only was one of, and still is one of my favorite album covers of all time, but when that album came out, I remember there was months and months where I was telling my parents, even my grandma, I was like, dude, that song Stricken is just so badass. Like, I need to get this album. I wasn't making money at the time. I wasn't working. And one day, they bought me the album. I remember I got 10,000 Fists and I got Shinedown's second album, which I can't remember the title of it, the same day, because they were just coming out. And I listened to maybe 2 songs on Shinedown and then threw on 10,000 Fists on the way home just because I wanted to get a flavor of both. And then Shinedown might as well not have existed because that album did not leave my sight, did not leave my hands for like the next 4 months. I mean, I just listened to it on repeat. I thought that there were so many awesome songs, so many musical growth for Disturbed and just what they were doing, and a lot more guitar solos, and just like I said, taking those two styles and bringing them together. And it also was the main reason why my first amplifier, which is still the only amplifier that I have, which is right down here, was a Randall, because at the time Don Donegan, the guitarist for Disturbed, played a Randall, and I was like, fuck, I want to sound like him, so I got that. And that's still, things that are very closely tied to me gaining things as I was learning guitar have always stuck with me, and this is an album that have always stuck with me for that reason too. Number 7 is an interesting entry on here because it actually influenced me to fall in love with 2 separate bands. And that was Stained, The Singles, which was a greatest hits album. Now, I had already been familiar with Stained. I was already a moderate fan of Stained. Like, I loved It's Been a While, I loved Outside, and I had 14 Shades of Grey when it came out, but it was a very different flavor than Break the Cycle, so I didn't really get into it at the time. But when the singles came out, I got it as a Christmas present because I liked Stained, and I got this along with Foo Fighters' Skin and Bones, which was like a live acoustic album, which I really didn't care for all that much because all my favorite Foo Fighters songs, I liked hearing the studio version, not an acoustic version. So I gravitated much more towards Stained the Singles. And what Stained the Singles did for me was flesh out the missing albums and the missing era, both before Break the Cycle and after Break the Cycle, to make me absolutely fall in love with not only Aaron Lewis, but Staind, which still, like all the bands on here pretty much, except for NSYNC, remains one of my favorite bands of all time. And Aaron Lewis, to this day, is one of the most influential and one of my favorite songwriters of all time. Political shit aside, I know that comment's coming too. So you've got Staind the singles, and all of a sudden now I'm like, holy shit, I gotta get these other albums. I gotta get Chapter 5, I gotta get where's all these other Staind albums? I gotta go get them. You get to the end of Staind the singles, and there is a couple of acoustic covers that were taken from a live show. One of which is Comfortably Numb, which is, to this day, one of my favorite songs from Pink Floyd, and probably my favorite guitar solo of all time, like ranked, that's number one. And then they did an acoustic version of Alice in Chains' Nutshell. Alice in Chains was a band that I was familiar with for 2 songs, Rooster and Man in the Box, and that was about it. Never really got into the grunge era. I did not like Nirvana, and if I didn't like Nirvana, I just decided I was probably not gonna like anything else. And I fell in love with Nutshell. And I'm going, what is this song? Because I don't remember the album if it said Alice in Chains on it or not. But I was asking my dad, I'm like, what is this song? Like, what album is this, what Staind album is this on? And he's like, that's an Alice in Chains song. And I was like, holy shit, really? Started listening to Facelift. Started listening to, Dirt. Started listening to the Tripod album, and I'm just like, holy shit, I like grunge. I love grunge. Alice in Chains is fucking awesome. What the hell is going on? And finally, through the magic of pirating music, I was able to get the studio version of Nutshell, because it was from an EP, Jar of Flies, that I could not find at Best Buy to save my life. That was the only music store I had in my area. And I swear to God, the first time that I played the studio version of Nutshell, it was the first time I listened to music and I felt like I had a euphoric reaction to it. Because I was expecting a slower acoustic song, like Down in a Hole, or a very similar version, like the studio version probably was just a stripped acoustic version of the same song. And it's not. There's a lot more to the studio version of Nutshell. And something about it, just like it was the first like religious experience that I had listening to a song, to where I think I literally pressed play on my stereo that was on top of my TV, and I don't think I ever moved away, sat down, or turned my head the entire 3-4 minutes that song played. I was just sitting there like, holy shit, this is my favorite song of all time. And to this day, the studio version of Nutshell still is my #1 favorite song of all time. There's something about it. There's something about the simplicity of it. There's something about the beauty of it and the sadness of it that just, it's the only piece of music that I can think of that every time that I listen to it, it penetrates me. I don't want to get too ridiculous with the hyperbole here, but I'm swear to God, this song did something to me. And it even it reinforced itself later on whenever I was 21 years old. I had to get my wisdom teeth taken out, and I was sitting on the operating table getting ready to get put under so that they could take my teeth out. And the doctor came in and he's like, hey, do you like Alice in Chains? Do you mind Alice in Chains? And I'm like, fuck no, I don't mind Alice in Chains. I love Alice in Chains. And he's like, all right, cool. They're my favorite band, so I like listening to them when I perform surgery. And he presses play on his playlist, and the song that plays is Nutshell. And I'm sitting there listening to Nutshell as the gas is turned on and my consciousness is starting to slip away, and I'm feeling myself sink into the floor fucking Get Out. And that experience was another version of euphoria that I had with this song. So I'm spending a lot of time talking about Alice in Chains when the album was Staind, the singles that I'm supposed to be talking about, but that's how important this one album was for me. Made me a Staind fanatic, and then gave me a whole other band to obsess over and my favorite song of all time. Number 8 is going to be when I was a senior in high school, and Alter Bridge's Blackbird, their second album and still their best album. Absolute perfect album was released. Now, I was always a Creed fan. I'm still a Creed fan. I understand you can make jokes about, mainly just the singer, let's be honest. You can make jokes about Scott Stapp all day long, but I always loved the music, and I still love their music to this day. And I did not even hear about Alter Bridge until damn near Blackbird was about to be released. And I was sitting in high school and somebody was talking about a concert that had happened either an hour or two away or something like that, that was Shinedown and Three Doors Down and Alter Bridge. And I'm sitting here, I'm doing my work. I was a pretty quiet guy in high school, and I'm listening to them talk about Alter Bridge, and this guy that was pretty, musically intelligent, musically informed, was correcting somebody, because they were like, oh, did you know Three Doors Down is the same singer as Creed? And he's like, no, you fucking idiot. Like, it's Alter Bridge. Alter Bridge is the band of Creed without the singer. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. And so aside from that just being funny to witness, I was like, holy shit, Creed made another band? I gotta check that out. And finally I saw their first album, One Day Remains, and I listened to it, and I liked it, but there was something that was so different about it. I think I was just expecting Creed with a different singer. There was something that was so different and so much more dynamic about it that I didn't quite know how to accept it. I didn't quite know how to take this new band. Over time, I started to really enjoy it, but when Blackbird came out, Blackbird is the moment when Alter Bridge came together, because most, if not all, of One Day Remains was already written, and they had Miles Kennedy join the band and just kind of add his vocals to it, and that was the first album. The first album is pretty much predominantly Mark Tremonti. You get to Blackbird, and that's the first time that you get that synergy of Mark Tremonti's kind of powerful approach to music, and him trying to really prove himself and make a stamp with his guitar playing that has gone leaps and bounds from what he was doing in Creed, to the much more dark, introspective, metaphoric take that Miles Kennedy has on writing music. And when those two came together, you got one of the greatest rock albums of all time in Blackbird. This is one of those albums you can literally put on and listen to every single song and never have the desire to click next. I mean, from the single, which Rise Today was just felt like one of those songs that was uplifting at the time. I was getting ready to graduate high school. It kind of felt like one of those songs to me, seize the day, bitch. It's your time to shine. It's the songs like Blackbird. I mean, the title song is like one of the most epic music tracks of all time. Buried Alive. There are so many songs on here that are just not only just fucking kick-ass songs that you can listen to 1,000 times and never get tired of, that are just so musically rich. To think that Creed, a band that I love, but I admittedly was a very kind of simplistic take on rock music, the guys that made that made this. Holy shit. And I've talked about it ad nauseum, so I won't go into depth, but this was also one of those albums that when I first listened to it, I was like, I'm getting online right now. I'm downloading every possible guitar tab that I can find for any song on this album, and I am learning this bitch cover to cover. And never quite got there, because I've never quite gotten to the musical level of Mark Tremonti, but there were so many songs here that, man, if you were in my neighborhood, I apologize, because the entire rest of the year of 2008, you were here in Alter Bridge just about every night. Number 9 is going to be Stone Sour's audio Secrecy. Now, of all the albums on this list that have all impacted me in many different ways and to different variations of strength, this is the one album in my life that quite literally felt like it was made for me, like it was written for me. Like Corey Taylor was spying on me, saw all the things that I was going through at the time, and literally wrote an entire album like a how-to guide to get out of the bullshit that I was in at the time. It's amazing. Like, I've never, before this album, I thought that was a crock. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, nobody has an entire album that's just made for you. Like, maybe one song you can kind of interpret. No. Literally every song on this album. I was maybe a year plus out of dropping out of college. I had dropped out, moved back home, and I was just in this funk to where I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to go in the military, which is something before that time I would have said, fuck no, that's just not for me my entire life. I didn't know if I was just going to go into the workforce. I didn't know if I wanted to just, decompress for a while and go back to college, try again. College was just, that 1 year I had was terrible for me. And so I became kind of addicted to technology to where I was just watching movies, TV shows, doing video games all the time, not wanting to do anything else. I was working, but when I was not working, nothing else mattered. I was just electronics. There was a girl at work that I had a crush on, started to become kind of, not in a scary way, but infatuated with, to a point where no other girl mattered. That was it. This needs to work, otherwise that's my last chance for love. It was like that type of thing. There was so many things going on within this 1 year that was really starting to take like this mental and emotional toll on me, because it just felt like I was just spiraling. Like I would never did drugs. I was never really somebody that drank. Like there was no like serious damage going on, but just emotional tolls of somebody that just now has no direction in life. And then I started to listen to Come Whatever May, which was their second album, while I was in the process of possibly entering the military. Then eventually, Audio Secrecy came out, and I was a big enough fan of what I had heard on Come Whatever May that I was like, okay, I'll check out this new album. And it was almost terrifying how lyrically this album just spoke to every single thing that I was going through. You have that song Digital Did You Tell, which is talking about unplugging, living your life, quit being tethered to technology, and I was like, holy shit, yeah, I need to take that to heart. You had songs like Hesitate and Imperfect that were speaking to the problems that I was having with this girl that was never going to work out, and even if it did work out, would have been an absolutely horrible situation for me to be in. And telling me basically to my face, like, you need to have the strength to walk away. You need to have the strength to be able to say that this is not going to work. And all of that just, it literally felt like Corey Taylor sat me down in the room and was like, listen, motherfucker, I have things to say. And that whole album was what he was telling me. And it was just, it was unreal. It was otherworldly. It's still one of those albums that, you know, a lot of people are kind of divisive on, because it's a little bit more commercial than a lot of Stone Sour stuff. Certainly more commercial than what he's known for doing with Slipknot, but as amazing as a lot of the other Stone Sour albums are, like House of Golden Bones 1 and 2, like, are probably the most perfect 2-pack, the most perfect concept album that I have ever heard. But Audio Secrecy still remains my favorite Stone Sour album, because it's just incredible music, it's diverse, you have heavy stuff, you have lighter stuff, you have things that feel at home on the radio but don't feel like it's pandering to the radio, which is a very fine line to do. And because of how much this was literally a story, this was literally a chapter in my life in an album. And now we are finally at number 10, which is going to be another culture shock, maybe a surprising answer for some people, not as surprising as number 1. But number 10 for me is Aaron Lewis's The Road. This was the first full-length solo country album that he ever released. Now, I am somebody that I do not like country music. My dad, I grew up with him, and he loved country music, and he loved heavy metal. And the eras when he was in a heavy metal mood, I was always happy. The eras that he was in a country mood, I was always miserable, because I was sick of hearing Brooks and Dunn and Garth Brooks and all that bullshit. Just not on my wavelength. You know, God bless everybody that loves country music, but it's just not my thing. But that's not to say that throughout my life there hasn't been a few country songs here and there that I've liked. And it's more so the old school country. It's more school, what they call like that rebel country, where it's telling stories and kind of that stripped down, you know, acoustic guitar and a guy pouring his heart out. And that's something that kind of felt a little bit more real to me than what a lot of people call country nowadays, which really just feels like a second coming of pop rock, to be honest with you. Aaron Lewis comes out in a time where that pop rock country is all the rage, and it might even be one of the biggest genres of music out there at the time. You know, things like Billy Currington and Jason Aldean and Luke Bryan, like that was like all the rage. Aaron Lewis comes out with a little EP of just old school country. And not only was it surprising because you're like, the dude from Stained is now a country guy? What happened? And then his full-length album, The Town, comes out. And this album made me realize that I actually do like country music to an extent. I just don't like popular country music. I don't like what the radio tells me is country music. And I listened to this, and it just kind of, aside from the fact that I love Aaron Lewis, it was just like exactly what I have wanted out of country music. To where a lot of times when I hear it, I'm like, why can't it be this? And then Aaron Lewis just said, here, there, now it is. I mean, telling these personal stories about his parents, about his grandfather, about his time out on the road and leaving his family behind. Even just a song about taking his girls fishing for the weekend. You know, simple things that just don't have any place in rock music. Rock music is always deeper. It's always about the darker side of life for the most part. For the most part, not always. But country music was just talking about life. And that's what this album was. It was talking about life. And at the time when I heard it, it was just one of those moments where I was receptive. I was ready for something new. I was ready for a change. And Aaron Lewis's The Town was that change. Ever since then, I've loved every single country album that he has released. I've seen him live twice, once with his band and once solo acoustic, touring under this solo country venture that he's been on. I'm ready as fuck for him to get back with Staind, which he just has, and supposedly they're in the studio, so I'm ready for that. But I do love this other side of Aaron Lewis. I love his songwriting style. I love his stripped down approach to not only just writing music, but also the way that he sings. I mean, him and Corey Taylor seriously battle for my favorite frontmen, for just how powerful they both are with their writing and with their vocal performance and all of that. I'm an Aaron Lewis fanatic. And again, I know it's coming, political shit, don't care. Not talking about politics. I know people don't like him because he's conservative. Don't fucking care. As a music artist, as a songwriter, as a singer, and as a country artist, I love the guy. I love this album, and it officially made me open my eyes and start listening to other things that otherwise I would not have ever taken the chance to. So that's it, guys. That is 10 albums that have changed my life. Please let me know down below if you enjoy this type of content, if you want to see more videos like this, more top 10s, or even just, you know, maybe individual album videos where I'm talking about the songs and how it impacted me. If you want that type of content also on this channel, as well as the slew of new content that you've been getting with horror movies and especially video games of the PS5 era, let me know. Do you like this? Do you want more of it? Please. And help support it. So if you enjoy this, please like the video. Please share it around, because inevitably this is probably going to be a lower performing video for me. So if you like it, help get it out there. Help show me that you like it, and help show me that I should be doing more stuff like this. And if you like this type of content, look down below to the link for Stay Metal Ray's channel. Be sure to subscribe over there. He's an awesome guy. Tell him Cody sent you. Please hit the subscribe button over there, as well as here if you're finding me for the first time, and you will not regret it, I promise. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.